Welcome to the Your Lifestyle is Your Medicine podcast, where we do deep dives into topics of mind, body, and spirit. And through these conversations, you'll hear practical advice and effective strategies to improve your health and ultimately add health span to your lifespan. I'm Ed Paget. I'm an osteopath and exercise physiologist with a special interest in longevity. Now, when we talk about mind, body, and spirit, everyone seems to nod as though they understand. But the majority of people I ask about spirit seem to get a little uncomfortable. The closest lifestyle medicine comes to spirit is a focus on community and stress management. And for some, that might be enough. But for others, I feel there is a void that they are trying to fill. Today's guest is Amrit Singh. Now, he does not shy away from this topic. In fact, he actively embraces it. From an upbringing in Germany and a hard-partying lifestyle, he made a U-turn and found Kundalini Yoga. After practicing it for about 5 years, he decided to move to India to deepen his exploration of both yoga and meditation. After 20 years there, he left India and has recently moved to Valle de Bravo in Mexico. His experience with yoga and meditation allow him to work one-on-one with clients with a special focus on supporting people to create the freedom they need while doing what they love. Amrit, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
All right, I'm just going to go straight for it. I'm going to ask you what I think is a tough question. You may find it easy. I don't know. But do you think the world is suffering from a spiritual crisis?
Beautiful question. I love it because a crisis is such a beautiful thing, in my opinion, because it allows us, when our body goes into crisis, it's usually to resolve something and allow for it to grow. We can resist that and we can fight it and we can pretend it's not there and just say like, no, I'm not in crisis. But that just makes things worse. So when we go into crisis, it's a time to slow down. It's a time to reflect. It's a time to go inwards. And it's a time to start listening, because the crisis is a little bit of a signal, right? It's a little bit like when you have a refrigerator and you got that red warning light blinking and you're like, oh my God, my refrigerator is in crisis. And so you call up the mechanic and he comes over and he's like, I got this. And he pulls out his pliers and he cuts that little wire to the red light and see, crisis averted. It's not blinking anymore. And you're thinking, oh my God, no, that's not what I needed. I wanted to know what is the root cause. Why do I have that headache? Why is my back hurting? Why am I having issues with my body? Why am I having issues with connecting deeply with something which I know is inside of me, something I remember from when I was a little child, something I remember from these beautiful, special moments in my life when I deeply, deeply connected. And that's really, where I see the world being in crisis around spirituality. Because I think, if we look back 5,000, 10,000 years, there was a lot of spirituality in the world. Every little community had their shaman, their practice nature medicine, they practice connecting with the spirits in some way. And then over the last, 2,000-3,000 years, it was kind of this more patriarchal male society with the religion, with the rules, with the standards, really taking this monopoly on spirituality. And I think it really just got stale. I think that's a big problem. A lot of the religions are having right now is they're having this big outpour of people that the young generation is just not interested anymore. Yeah. They're like, hey, this is not what I want. I get more spiritual connection from watching videos on TikTok than I get from going to church or going to my temple or doing whatever I do. So for me, I get this a lot, just the way I look, with my beard and my turban. I was deep in a religious practice for many years, but I stepped out of that now because I realized this was just a limiting container for me, which was super helpful because it allowed me to really connect deeply with myself, but it became limiting. And so now I'm really, I don't want to just be seen as a Sikh, and I don't want to be defined like that. I want to be seen as a spiritual being having a human experience on this planet.
Beautiful. So let's look at that a little bit. So would you say you are a Sikh? I mean, you're wearing the turban, you have the beard, but you don't want to be defined as a Sikh. That's an interesting sort of contradiction.
Yeah, I realized I really like my beard. So I'm like, I'm keeping it. And I
Okay.
got long hair, which is one of the Sikh traditions. And I really like my long hair. And wearing a turban is a super convenient way to manage your hair. And
Right.
so I really just enjoy it. It helps me deeply in my meditative
Mm,
practices. So I'm really using it as a tool.
mm,
And so for me, I don't know. I still love the word seek because it really in translation means student and spiritual seeker. And
mm,
I see myself as a student, but I don't want to just be limited to this narrow religious group. So I don't enjoy much going to the temple. I don't enjoy much, being in the community of other Sikhs, which is very, like all the religious
mm,
communities. The Christians like to hang with the Christians, the
mm.
Jews go together with the Jews. And that's okay because I've been there for so many years myself. But now I'm excited about talking to other people from other religions, talking to people who don't have, who are atheists, talking to people who just believe in the religion of nature. That's what excites me. And that's where I find my true spirituality.
Mm. Interesting. I also find in organized religions, if you have a spiritual experience and you're not the priest, that's generally not accepted. I was
Mm.
raised Catholic, and my mother is a sort of born again Christian, and she would speak in tongues and have all sorts of information downloaded from from the Lord, she would say, and some people were very embracing of that, and she found her community, but the more traditional Catholics they weren't happy with that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's scary and it pushes them out of their comfort zone and it doesn't fit into that narrow little slice of reality.
Mm-hmm.
And that's perfectly okay. But that's also why I walked away from that and I have such a broader approach. And I think it's so amazing to talk to people who have practiced other spiritual paths than I have and find all the beautiful similarities and find how we're all doing the same thing and how we're all on the way back to source energy, no matter if we call it God, Allah, or Jehovah. And it really doesn't matter because it's all the same thing in there. And that's for me like such a beautiful inspiration of really encourage more people to connect with their inner spirituality. Because, like I said already a little bit earlier, I really strongly feel that we're not humans looking for a spiritual experience from the outside. We're the spiritual beings taking on this human body when we incarnate into our little body, into our mother's belly. And we're coming here for this human experience. And this human experience is all about duality. It's all about, having good days, having bad days, going through hardship, having high, amazing emotions. And that's what we came here for. We didn't come here to sit in a cave on the mountaintop and meditate for 200 years and, have our body wither away while we are going into deepest spiritual connection. We got plenty of that before we came.
Mm-hmm. So someone once said to me, very wise person said, a lot of the spiritual gurus have it backwards. And I was like, what do you mean? He says, well, if you spend this, he calls it earth walk. If you spend this time on earth seeking spiritual enlightenment, you're missing the point that you're already enlightened and you've spent eternity as a spirit.
I love it.
This is your time as a physical being. So enjoy the taste and the feelings and the pain and the anger and all that kind of stuff, because you don't get to experience that as a spirit.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yes, like people are taking the psychedelic mushrooms or the ayahuasca, myself included, maybe trying to have a spiritual experience, but actually we don't need that. We are that,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that and I really love the earth walk
Yeah.
because it's like such a great way of explaining what we're all doing here. And this is something which is actually big in my work is where I always bring people back to this point. Hey, you don't have to try to chase spirituality. You don't have to try to find God. It's all there already.
Mm-hmm.
Just get out of the way and enjoy it and just be with it. And it's such a beautiful experience.
Do you find, bringing back to the original question, do you find people are trying to chase something that they feel like is missing in their lives?
Yeah, because I think we're trained to chase. We're trained to chase money. We're trained to chase the American dream of having the big house and owning it, and then having your 2 cars and having your kids in college, right? We're trained and conditioned to chase because our parents were chasers, our grandparents were chasers, our great grandparents were chasers. And it's really this, it's also the people who have survived and had children and had their families survive were the chasers. They were the ones who were out there, chopping wood and pickling their carrots and hunting the deer and making sure there was enough for everybody so the next generation would survive. So we're dealing with this now. We're dealing with this generational imprint of being a chaser. And so this is very counterintuitive to say like, hey, you got it all already. You don't have to chase. Prosperity and abundance is right there with you. You just have to trust and go inwards and really connect with your heart and connect with your authentic self, and everything comes to you. So for me, I have a lot of compassion for being a chaser because I'm still till today a chaser in some certain parts of my life. And I have compassion for myself. And it's a healing journey and it's a process.
And so when you have a client come to you, you're saying that you can help them have freedom and do what they want to do, to live in joy and love. But what is the thing that brings them to you? What's the sort of the commonality? Have you noticed that?
It's interesting because it's almost never the real work we're going to end up doing at the end, which is connecting to the heart, connecting to authentic self, connecting to identity. Because I realized if I would be leading with that, people would just be, oh my God, that weird guy with the beard and the turban is right over my head. That's not a connection. So what I find is where I connect with people is when I say, hey, are you struggling with your health? Are things not well in your body? Do you want to make changes? And they're like, oh my God, yeah, I want to make changes. I want to exercise more. I want to eat better and I can't bring myself. So we start talking about that the first 2-3 sessions. And then very quickly we come to, why do you want to make those changes? And then it comes to, because I want to be closer to myself. I want to be more connected with myself. And the same thing, like I get a lot of clients who I help in their relationships. So they come to me and they say, oh my God, in my relationship with my wife, she is so horrible and she this and she that. And they keep pointing their finger. And then we talk about that a little. And then they very quickly realize that in order to improve their relationship, they need to step it up. Because as we all know, who have been in a relationship before, even though we wish for that magic wand, we could just point at our partner and transform them into these beautiful beings, which will never piss us off and never upset us and always do the right thing. And they are just wishing for that same stuff to point at us, right? But when you come to that point, especially in long-term relationships, I think we all realized that no matter how hard we try, we cannot change our partner, right? We can maybe like twist their arm and they change for a little bit, but that backfires. Or we can, be all pouty and be like, yeah, you're not nice to me. So but ultimately the only way to achieve change in your partner is if they voluntarily choose to change. And then it's permanent and then it's real. And guess when they choose to change? When they see change in ourselves, and when they see us showing up for the relationship, and when they see us investing in the relationship and saying like, I'm showing up, I want to do something different. Like right now I'm working with a group of men who is coming together, and we're doing this group coaching program where we inspire each other to show up for ourselves, and then an extension to show up for our families, and then extension show up for our kids, and then an extension show up for our colleagues, for our bosses, for our friends, for our parents, right? The ripple always goes bigger, but it starts with us showing up for ourselves.
Yeah, I love it. There's a book called Conversations with God with Neil Donald Walsh. I'm not sure if
I love that book.
have you read that book?
One of the first ones I read, yeah.
Yes, it was me too. It really sort of changed my perspective on things. So I totally recommend it to anyone who's listening. Neil Donald Walsh, Conversations with God. There's a piece in there he talks about relationships, and he says, well, relationships are essentially selfish. And I read that line, I was like, what? And he says, well, if you think about it, you come together, and if you're not the best you can be, your partner is going to reflect that back at you. And so your partner is your sort of, well, your partner in this evolution. And if they are not the best they can be, you're going to let them know, and so on. But if you both try and be the best you can be, you're both going to grow and become better, but you can't do that individually. So you go into a relationship to become better, and it's a selfish motivation. You do it for yourself. And I read that and I was like, well, that's such a different sort of perspective on relationships, isn't it? Like most people from a, I guess we can call it like a non-spiritually evolved point of view, they come in and say, well, I want to be in a relationship with that person to change them. Or they say, I want to be in a relationship with that person because they complete me. And it's too much, putting too much on your partner. Whereas if you come into a relationship and say, okay, this is my opportunity to be the best version of me, and I'm going to show this person that, and they come in with the same intention, it could be beautiful.
Yeah, no, totally. And what comes to mind, which is so similar, is in so many religious or spiritual practices, there is this concept of selfless service, right? Where you do community service and you go out there. I mean, Mother Teresa was the best example, right? Just giving all her life energy to serve and serve and serve. And when you really go deeply into that, that's a deeply selfish act. Because when I get to give over and over again, I'm getting so much more back than I'm putting out. And so that's what inspired these people who, like Mother Teresa, just, like try to sleep just as little hours as possible so she could be out there serving more people and serving more people over and over again. And it's a deeply selfish act, just the same way as serving in your relationship is a deeply selfish act. And then from there, from the outside to the person you love the most, to then take the next step to yourself and to start deeply serving yourself as a selfish act, beautiful things happen.
Now, do you feel as though the spirit should be tested? And I'll explain what I mean. So when we want to make a muscle stronger, we exercise that muscle. And when we want to make our mind stronger, we exercise the mind. And if we've got mind, body, spirit, there's not much exercises for spirit, if that makes sense. But you talk about how a spiritual discipline can make someone a better version of themselves. Is that what we're talking about? Exercises for spirit, or can you help me understand?
I like that. I never looked at it like that, but I like the concept of exercising spirit to make it stronger, because just like a muscle, it works the same way. I think one of the big issues which we're all dealing with is that probably 90% of those exercises are subconscious. Like it's this, like when your child gets sick, or a loved one dies, or the love of your life suddenly tells you, hey, I found someone new, by the way, our relationship is over, I'm out. And that's when you start doubting spirit. You start doubting God. You see 10,000 children died in Africa in some famine, and you're like, how can there be a God? Right? That's those moments when the doubt comes in. And I think that doubt is kind of like a way of exercising spirit. And it's a little bit of a subconscious process. And so it's not ideal, because it's like all things that are subconscious, it just, you cannot really connect your awareness to it. So what I found is there's many practices, and funny enough, all the religions have them. And all the pre-religious spiritual practices have them. It's either they're spending the 3 nights alone in the forest and going through this process of, oh my God, am I going to die? Am I going to die? What's going to happen? Where am I going to find food? But then to really recognize that you deeply trust. In the religions, it's like you need to read this prayer 5 times a day. And then you're like, oh my God, reading the prayer is so boring. I don't want to read the prayer. But again, it's more of a conscious way of practicing the spirit muscle. And so ultimately, it's all just about strengthening spirit, strengthening the connection, strengthening this being tied to what's already there and just kind of recognizing it.
And if someone's listening to this and we've piqued their interest and they're like, okay, right, so yes, I feel there's a void, or I can hear this quiet voice, but I don't quite know what to listen to. Is there an entry-level spiritual practice that you recommend or you teach?
There's so many beautiful things to do, but I think the most entry level and something which I would recommend to everyone, and you can practice right now in this moment, is just to take a deep breath in and take a deep breath out, and take a deep breath in again and take a deep breath out again, and do it one more time, and just really consciously connect to your breath. And again, subconsciously, we're connected to our breath all day long. But the moment you take 30 seconds to just get conscious of your breathing, your mind starts calming down, your shoulders relax a little bit, your body goes out of this fight and flight response, and you're just much more yourself. And so that's the most beautiful spiritual practice. And if you can do that outside in nature, while you're going for a walk, or you're just sitting on a bench somewhere, even better. But that would be my recommendation.
That's so interesting. Yeah, breathwork is so key to many of the meditation practices and even the martial arts practices. And I think you've hit the nail on the head with just breathe.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's a beautiful thing to practice,
isn't it? The nature aspect. When people say to me, well, I'm not so sure there's spirit, or they're uncertain about some sort of more creative forces in the universe, I suggest they go into nature and just look at a leaf, or look at something that's not man-made, and just be sort of overwhelmed by the awe of how perfect everything is.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love that.
And so with your work you work with men and women, is that right?
Right now, I still work with men and women. I'm focusing more on going the direction to help men who are struggling in their relationships. Because I realized most of my clients who have been coming to me over the last couple of months were kind of those type of men. And I'm super excited about it, because it's something I went through in my life. I've been now married for 20 years. I broke through that pattern of, oh my God, I need to stop trying to change my wife and step up my game and take some responsibility. And it really transformed my marriage. And so I'm so excited about sharing that, because I feel this practicing in relationship is such a beautiful way. And how my teacher used to put it, he said, being married is the highest form of yoga, because that's spirit practice every single day, when you're just thinking like, oh my God, that person did it again. And obviously it has nothing to do with being married in the traditional sense, but being in a committed relationship, right? And and it doesn't matter, if you're straight, if you're gay, whatever, because a committed relationship is a committed relationship, and you need to show up for another human being. And that's a big challenge, because you ultimately have to really process what's going on inside of you. You have to look at the things which are hard to look at, which are so much easier to just blame on the other person. And if you don't process that, you start passing that on into the next generations. If you have kids, your kids will pick up your own patterns, how we picked up our parents' patterns.
Yeah. And are these men all in their midlife? Do you find this is a sort of a stage people go through, or is it after a certain time in their
No,
marriage?
it is a stage. It's about 35 to 55, what I found, where the men really say, like, my kids are not babies anymore, but they're still, young teenagers. We're still going to have them for 10 more years in the house. My connection with my wife is getting worse by the day. I'm seeing this gap opening. And my old approach of just being stoic and just say, like, I'll just wait 3 weeks till she calms down and then, everything is okay, doesn't work, because it produces the result of widening the gap. Yeah. So what can I do to start closing the gap? Because I'm committed to my family. I'm committed to my children. I'm committed to this person I'm in love with, or I used to be in love with, and maybe I think I'm in love with now, but every time I see her, I just get upset and I want to fight, right? To take that responsibility and start making the change is such a beautiful thing, because it doesn't need the other person in the relationship to also make a change. Because if you do the work, your relationship is going to change. And that's a beautiful thing.
That is beautiful. So Amrit, how can people find you if you've piqued their interest and they want to learn more from you?
One way to find me, if you're a man and you are in a relationship and you're struggling, is through marriagereconnectionroadmap.com. So we can add the link later, maybe under the podcast. So you can do that, or you can also find me on coachingnow.info, which is my regular website. And that's also where I take one-on-one clients. If you're not a fit for that program, I'm also willing to work with people one-on-one on other aspects. And what's really important for me is to work with people who are willing to go deep and who want to come to their authentic self. And we can take the road through their business or through their health or through their relationship. And it really doesn't matter. You're a man, you're a woman, it works. But I need that level of commitment, because if that's not there, I'm not willing to invest my time, because I think it will be a waste for both of us.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Amrit, for being on the show. That was very enlightening and a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Ed.
Thank you for joining me in my conversation with Amrit Singh. Now, if you've enjoyed listening to and learning from this podcast, please leave a comment, and you can leave a suggestion there for a future podcast guest as well. Additionally, in Apple, you can leave us up to a 5-star review as well as a comment. If you want my direct help with any aspect of longevity and lifestyle medicine, you can send me an email at ed@edpaget.com or visit my website, edpaget.com. And while you're there, you can also sign up for my weekly newsletter, which is packed full of great advice about lifestyle medicine and adding health span to your lifespan.